Hello and welcome to EPR with your favorite environmental enthusiasts, Nick and Laura. On today's episode, Laura and I forgo our segment today to acknowledge those impacted by Roe v. Wade and other forthcoming legislation at the Supreme Court. We talked to Matthew Sekol about ESG, technology, and comics. It's an absolutely delightful interview, and we were so happy to have him on, so you have to check it out. And finally, since Laura is not here while I'm recording this, I'm actually going to tell a joke instead. Now, it's a dad joke, so I'm warning you in advance. Just be prepared. Here we go. What did one tectonic plate say when he bumped into the other? Sorry, my fault. Okay, now that I heard myself say that out loud, maybe we don't do that again. Yeah, hit that music.
All right, mark your calendars. Please join us May 7th through 10th in Phoenix, Arizona for the 2023 Annual Conference and Training Symposium. More information will be posted soon, so make sure to check back at the website at www.naep.org. We appreciate all of our sponsors, and they will keep the show going. If you'd like to sponsor, please head on over to environmentalprofessionalsradio.com and check out the sponsor form for details. Let's get to our segment. Given the recent decision by the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade, we will be foregoing our usual segment chat and using this opportunity to say that we value all of you, regardless of race, gender association, or other distinction. As we have discussed previously with Fred Wagner, our legal expert and repeat guest, we should all be concerned about what this could mean for our women's rights and environmental rights and regulations in the future. For me, you can't tell anybody else what to do. For me, I'm not going down any of those dark roads. I have already read enough of them, refuted them in my head. Our guest, Matt Sekol, he even posted I've written and deleted so many tweets already. Yeah. And I'm like, same. Oh my gosh. Except I didn't post any. I'm resharing a couple of things that other people have shared, but I can't bring myself to put my own words because I know that a onslaught of dark road is coming ahead, and I'm like, no.
A lot of negative energy, no matter what, and it's just it's
insane. The whole situation is unbelievable. I mean, for me, what is blowing my mind the most? So, what doesn't blow my mind is that this happened because so many other things have already leading up to this.
Right.
But we have just undone our justice system. The thing that we thought was in place is not in place, and that's terrifying.
It's very it's a partisan decision, regardless of what your politics are. It's a very partisan decision. Like we talked about in the show with Fred before, it is absolutely partisan. And, there are going to be more of those cases coming. There's going to be more environmental cases like we've talked about that may get overturned on a partisan basis. And that is not what, in theory, the court is supposed to be.
Right. So what I thought we should do today is really not do anything so we don't lead a dark road of our own. Right. And we will continue to have these conversations with our legal experts and other people who can help us speak intelligently. And since you are in the great state of Texas, you're on one of those dark roads of your own right now anyway.
Yeah. It's best I don't say anything out loud or too loud.
Exactly. So for all of those reasons, and because our interview with Matt is so amazing and so long, let's just get to it. All right. Welcome back to EPR. Today we have Matthew Sekol on the show. Matthew was recently promoted to the Worldwide Sustainability Advocate with Microsoft. Super cool. Welcome, Matthew.
Hi. So glad to be here.
I think it's super exciting to have companies like Microsoft stepping up to do ESG and not just practicing themselves, but also creating products and services to help others implement their strategies. So first off, just tell us a little bit about the work that you do.
Sure. So as a sustainability industry advocate, I kind of have a horizontal view across all of our customers, no matter what industry vertical they're in. And I'm really meant to be like a sustainability subject matter expert that goes in, kind of swoops in, whether it's retail or CPG or financial services or whatever it is, brings that sustainability context in, like, what are the regulations? What do they need to think about from a scope 1, 2, and 3 perspective? And then kind of help them and help their Microsoft team get enabled quickly. And really, my goal is to try to get them to do something meaningful, right? We often talk about measuring, especially at Microsoft, we have products that help you measure and manage like your carbon emissions. I think those are super important because you can't manage what you can't measure, but I really want them to get moving on making improvements in their value chain and their ecosystem. So that's kind of my day-to-day.
All right. So could you just give us a little bit of an overview of how Microsoft is being the leader or being the role model in the space for other companies in the industry or just other companies in general?
Sure. So Microsoft has been reporting on these things for a while, but just in the past 2 years, we've really gotten deep with our environmental sustainability reporting. And I kind of look at those reports really as a framework for how customers can think about their own business. Now, we approach sustainability through technology, which should surprise nobody, right?
Right.
And there are 4 key ways from an environmental sustainability perspective that we believe technology can help. And it's carbon, it's water, it's waste, and it's ecosystem, or what some people call biodiversity. And so we've set goals along all of those. And when you read our report, you'll see things like how we're being responsible in our product manufacturing, because we make Xboxes, we make Surfaces, we build servers that go into our cloud. Like, we want to make sure that from a supplier perspective, as well as our own operations, that we're operating as effectively as possible. But we also help our customers do that, which is that's exactly what my job is, right? We have a whole team now of people. I'm on a newly formed team just to help with this. And we really try to bring some of that expertise over the decade plus that we've been working on this to our customers so that we can lift the entire economy up to help support the way that the environment improvements really need to go.
Awesome. Okay. I love that. We need our big companies to be leading the way in the spaces. So that's great. Well, I'm glad you touched on that. This was a new arena, a new group that you're working in, because I was kind of wondering that. But my next question has to do with the career path. And Podcat is really interested to know also. Podcat, as well as a large portion of our listeners, are into navigating their career paths. And it seems like everyone I talk to is either wanting to get into something that fights climate change or sustainability, which are very closely related. And you have a bachelor's degree in English. So for inspiration for those people who've gotten their environmental degrees and think they can't do what they want to do, tell us how you got from where you were to ESG at Microsoft.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, I want to say you have amazing people on this thing. So I feel a little bit like an imposter because I do not swim off the coast of anywhere and dive into anything and do any of that. But here's how I got there. So before I graduated with an English degree, the internet started booming. It was late 90s. I was down the path of getting my English degree, and I started learning HTML, which is web code. If you're like old school web code,
yep.
Self-taught, went to the head of the computer science department and said, "Hey, what would it take for me to switch to English to computer science? I've tutored calculus. Can I just get a computer science degree?" He literally laughed me out of his office, which I've never had happen in my life or career. And so I decided, you know what, I'm just going to graduate with an English degree. At the time, computer science really was more akin to electrical engineering. So I'm glad I didn't switch. And I got a whole bunch of soft skills, or what I like to call now adaptable skills, for like critical thinking and communication. And I took those skills, layered on some Microsoft certifications early on, and went right into IT. Most of my career has been focused on IT or technologies. So it's been 20 plus year career, mostly focused on that. When I came over to Microsoft about 4.5 years ago, I was segmented into financial services, which I did not have any experience with. Well, I can't say that. My dad is an actuary and my stepdad is an insurance adjuster. So I had some experience, but not any sort of practical experience. So I joined financial services, listened to podcasts on fintech, got quickly ramped up, and then I became the capital markets industry advocate, very similar to what I'm doing now, but focused on capital markets, which, if you notice my story, I do not have a background in capital markets either. So I did the same thing, and I kind of ramped up, and I came across, right before this role, that capital markets role, I came across ESG from the perspective of the financial markets. And I was looking at this trend, and it's so much more than a trend, but I was looking at it and I was saying, there is something fundamental here that I don't think companies understand. And so I started talking to customers across our other industries, and I would say to them, like, do you really understand what financial markets are doing with ESG and how they're looking at you? And their answer was, what is ESG? And so I had this like epiphany that there's something here. And then, of course, COVID hit. ESG just accelerated. COP26 happened. And really, both climate change, ESG, sustainability, all of these things suddenly came to the fore. And I found Microsoft had this new team coming up. So I ended up taking 2 classes at NYU Stern, one on corporate sustainability, one on more ESG investing and sustainable finance. I wrote white papers about it. I joined working groups on sustainability from a data perspective, from a regulatory perspective, just started like a sponge. I would just kind of grab everything I could. And I applied for this job here and I ended up getting it. So what I'd say the takeaway is because I know you have obviously a lot of people with environmental science as their background, there's such a unique opportunity right now to take your skills and apply it to business to drive an impact. Mm-hmm. From the financial markets to their investments, which are the companies that I talk to every day, they don't have environmental science expertise, just like they used to not have technology expertise. And they're all trying to ramp up on what is their impact? Like, it's really 2 things. One is, what is their impact? And then the other thing is, what is the impact of what's happening out there on me? And so this gets into things like, where are my facilities located? Am I subject to wildfires and flooding? How do I redo the land responsibly around, and considering things like biodiversity, but also like wildfire avoidance? This expertise does not exist in corporate America today. Yeah. So I'm a huge fan of like taking the skills that you have, because I was an English major, and applying them in a completely different way.
No, I'm trying to process everything you just said, because there's like 6 different directions I could go right now. Based on the questions we're ready to ask you. I love it. I think I've had this in my brain for quite a while too. And we need role models in larger company spaces, so that, because they're the ones who start, you kick it off, right? Microsoft, Google, Apple, they're the ones who kick off these practices and then others follow. And so this needs to happen. Before we get too much further, in case people listening don't know, but just if anyone else listening has this problem too, how do you describe ESG to people who don't understand it?
ESG are the environmental, social, and corporate governance non-traditional factors that play into the risks and opportunities for you and your ecosystem. And it's a little bit different from sustainability. And what we're seeing out there right now is there's kind of an artificial conflation happening. So sustainability is more the table stakes. I should be operating at low carbon. Water management should be a priority. Waste management should be a priority. And everybody should be doing that. ESG is more like, well, I'm a clothing manufacturer, and where do I get the water for my dyes? And is that water replenishable, or am I going to run out in 10 years and then have to move my entire factory? Should I be looking at dry dyes? And then what are the chemical side effects maybe from those dry dyes? It's more those, ESG is really more on those risks that exist and the opportunities that exist as well. But that conflation's still happening. And that's what I try to really get people to call out. Sometimes I see companies starting with one and then going into the other, which is great, because they'll often start with ESG and they'll think about their risks. And then they'll be like, oh, I really need to lower my carbon. I didn't realize this was such a problem. So it can start kind of in both ways, but it can also intersect. If and this came up, I won't name names, but there was a proxy vote at a global construction retailer about sourcing from sustainable lumber places. And for that, it is an intersection of sustainability, because you're trying to find sustainable lumber. And then it's a risk, because if you don't source from a sustainable lumber supplier, you're probably going to run out of lumber eventually, right? Yeah. So there are also intersections as well. So I try to start off with it's the risks and opportunities that exist, but it quickly goes into, wow, there are a lot of nuances all over the place. And yeah, it can become a hot mess really fast.
Right. That makes sense. And related to that, I read your article titled "Not Everybody Wants to Save the World," where in it you talked about the intersection of social justice and sustainability. So what is the relationship between those two seemingly unrelated issues?
Yeah. So, as I'm sure your listeners are aware, there are a lot of marginalized communities in emerging markets globally that are disproportionately impacted by things like climate change versus like countries like the US that are really the main polluters, right, or contributors to carbon growth. Certainly an issue. One of the ways that this is exacerbated just came up recently, where it looks like there's a little bit of a misunderstanding on ESG. So here's one of the other problems: the social justice aspect is getting exacerbated. When the markets are looking at ESG risks and that materiality, in other words, what matters to that company with its intersection along ESG, one of the things that's emerging is sometimes working in emerging markets can be a risk because they're far flung away places. Getting the goods from there to where I need them could be a climate risk and the supply chain could be disrupted. Maybe I should onshore all that stuff. When things like that happen, you suddenly intersect with a different aspect of ESG, which is something called externality, where you're talking about the company's impact on the world. And so if you start, the financial markets have already started pulling a little bit out of emerging markets because of the risk. But if companies and their supplier, they start pulling their supply chains out, now you're double whammying these marginalized communities in a way that you really need to think about. This is something that I think, if I'm on a procurement team of a major manufacturer or retailer, this is such a huge, complex issue. You could easily switch one dial down on your risk and turn up somebody else's dial on their risk. So you have to kind of look at the entire ecosystem in which you operate in order to try to get it right. And you might not get it right, but really try to get it right is what I tell everybody.
Right. It's honestly a good segue to our next question. Because, whenever we have new trends like ESG coming through, companies can latch onto the idea of doing something more than what the idea actually represents or what would be actual progress. So what are those current challenges with greenwashing in businesses, and how can we help companies avoid that?
Right. So this is a big challenge, and it comes back to that conflation a little bit. So as an investor or as a company, you have to be clear on what your goals are. So if you're an investor and you want to help save the planet, there's a whole investing methodology called socially responsible investing that you can follow, and you can find funds that do that. Again, it's on the fund managers to explicitly state those goals. If you're a company and you want to address your material risk, you might do something like what's called a materiality assessment, where you sit down probably with a consulting firm of some kind, or you could do it internally and say, where are my E, S, and G risks? And then you map it out and you prioritize which one you think hit your business the hardest. Now, what we're seeing from a financial markets perspective is that conflation of socially responsible investing with ESG investing. So people are getting confused about, am I saving the world, or am I identifying my risks and managing them well? Because it's two very different things. And again, sometimes they can intersect, but they don't always do. And we're also seeing other more harmful trends or extreme trends that are leading to calls of greenwashing, which are, there are companies that are misstating their impact, both on their risk management as well as their climate change impact. There are financial services firms who have done not so great things like rename what was previously called a growth equity fund, for example, into an ESG fund. Now, there are regulations, like the EU has a regulation called SFDR, which is focused on mitigating that exact issue. And what they do is they said, you as a financial services firm, it's great that you want to be green or sustainable or ESG. You really need to describe to your investors what that means. And we're going to be watching you.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge fan of that regulation for that exact reason, because it tries to mitigate what's happening out there today.
Right. So it's kind of like certified organic. I'm like, well, if it's in the ground, it's organic.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. And so is there a law like that in the US?
There is not a law like that in the US. So currently there are 3 draft proposals out there for companies in order to get investors the information they need. One is the SEC has one out. The EU Commission has one out on something called the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, if I got that acronym right. And then coming out of COP26, the group that's responsible for accounting standards, which is the IFRS, launched a subgroup called the ISSB, which is International Sustainability Standards Board. All three groups are kind of doing different things. I've heard they're starting to work together, but ultimately what they're trying to do is get companies to report on two things. One is kind of what are they doing to meet their commitments? So if they made all these commitments, what are they actually doing and how can they prove that? And then the second thing is, how does climate risk impact their operations? Now, this is all going to come together in their 10K filing, hopefully. So when a company does their finances and their balance sheet, and here in the US, when they file their 10K, there will be a little line for sustainability that says, here's how we're meeting our commitments, here's how we're meeting our climate risk. Something like that is where things are heading.
And we talk, you work at Microsoft, so we have to ask you a couple of technology questions, right? Like,
sure.
So integrating technologies kind of in our environmental projects has become a point of emphasis for environmental policy. And we want to know, like, how do we use technology? How can we use it to improve sustainability, to improve ESG, to help these companies do their reporting?
Yeah, this is also a very complicated question. So ultimately, ESG is about data. And I'm not sure how many folks in your audience are going to be familiar with this, but as a technologist, we've been talking about this thing called digital transformation for 8 years now, since 2014. And what it really meant at the time was kind of leveraging cloud technologies to modernize your business operations. Well, some companies took that on, some companies didn't. What we're seeing with sustainability is like a renewing of that digital transformation, because you can't measure these things unless they're digitized, or at least you can't measure them easily. So the first step is kind of like getting digital transformation up and running and starting to migrate or starting to modernize. Past that, though, it becomes how do you modernize your business operations? In order to get the sustainability signals out, you need to make some sort of good decision. And that could be things like IoT sensors. It could be analytics from planetary data sets, like Sunny Fleming is one of my close friends now. And I love talking to her about this because I don't get that part and I help her with ESG. So
She's
we talk about
fangirl of yours.
We talk pretty regularly now. So it's about the application of technology onto your company in order to help solve these challenges. Whether it's a risk, or whether it's just trying to do the right thing and lower your carbon. But it's going to be, I'd say, specific to that company. Like the technologies that would go into a manufacturer might be like IoT, because you're going to want to measure each piece of equipment to make sure you're eking out efficiency. For a retailer, it might be some sort of climate risk data against your suppliers to show, where's my risk coming from? Am I going to be able to get my delivery of widgets to my store in time, or do I need to reroute them through some other place? For a financial services firm, it's a massive data challenge because they're kind of sitting on top of everybody, looking at all of these things happening, and they got to pull it all together in order to make investment decisions. So different pieces of technology for kind of different industries, but it all starts with digital transformation.
Okay. So digital transformation has been going for a while. And I think, for me, I think a lot of people, I don't save documents on my computer anymore. They're in the cloud. What's next? So, I think we are getting close to most people understanding, and, people know what the cloud is now. I think for a long time, it's like, what's that? What is next what is next that's coming out that people should be looking at and saying, okay, I've gone paperless. I've done the digital transformation part. What do I do next?
Yeah, I could answer this in a number of ways because there's so much activity right now. What I would encourage people listening, there's a lot of passion out there. And I've seen a marked shift in the amount of employees that want to engage on this topic. So the first thing I would say is get ready for a deluge of people coming to you asking you for what your company is doing about this topic, because it is real. And what's amazing is the best leaders, I think, are capturing that momentum, and they're really trying to drive change. Because when you have somebody passionate about sustainability and who understands your business, coincidentally, amazing things can happen. Long term, I think, this is going to remain a data challenge. I think over the long term, the biggest problem right now is pulling together information. And the reason is it's hard right now. most of this data exists either inside the company and it's considered like competitive data, so they won't share it, or it's published out in something like a CSR or sustainability or ESG report in a PDF where you can't get to that data. And so it's very hard for companies who are managing supply chains to kind of understand their impact. And it's hard for governments to understand what the companies and utilities are doing to really put the company where they need to be, or put the countries that they operate in where they need to be. I think long-term, we're going to see kind of a democratization of sustainability data across economies, across markets, so that everybody can make the most responsible decision possible. I think it's probably 5 to 7 to 10 years out, but in the conversations I've been having, especially with financial services customers, it's a need in order to address risk, in order to stop what's happening and lower risk. It's something that we're just going to have to keep driving towards.
Yeah. And I think we see that. We've had some guests on. Shell Gentman talked about her project with TOPS and NASA, and a lot of environmental consultants and nonprofits are collecting their data and putting it together and trying to come up with their regional solutions. So it makes sense that we now have access globally or in the cloud. Now let's collaborate on that information. So That's awesome. And you mentioned investments a couple of times. We've had Ted Janilis on the show, and he talked about investing in oceans. What advice do you have for ESG investing and sustainable impact investing? Is there a difference between the two of those?
Oh, yeah. Oh, totally. So, and there's a third thing. So let's start with the third thing, which is
the third thing.
Yeah, there's always a third thing. So let's start with philanthropy. Philanthropy is a clear way for companies to have an impact with people and try to funnel people who are doing the impactful projects, the money that they need in order to get some sort of thing done. Could be related to their business, but likely isn't, right? Microsoft, for example, it's a little bit less philanthropic, but we run this thing called the Climate Innovation Fund, where we're trying to invest in startup companies that need funds to get over kind of that valley of death, specifically, mostly around carbon removal projects, but also water and waste projects. But from a sustainable investment perspective, those projects are largely on the greening of things, right? Those are the projects where a company's trying to greenify their campus or make the transition from dirty fossil fuels to green energy with a solar or wind farm or something. When a company makes an investment in an ESG project downstream, it's usually to address some kind of risk or create a new opportunity. Like, always think risks. Whenever I say ESG, think risks and opportunities, because it could go either way. So it could, for a company making investments, it could go along any of those paths. If you're talking about like, I'm a retail investor and I want to make some sort of, investment decision, again, you have to read what the fund manager or what the financial product is offering. And if it's not clear, I'd say probably don't invest in it, because you might not get what you think you're getting. In fact, on that perspective, it is conflated so badly. I'm on Twitter and there was an author I follow, and he said, I will never invest in ESG again, because he thought he was investing in something that was helping to solve climate change. But that's not necessarily what ESG investing is about. It's about those risks and opportunities for the company. So actually, another way to think about it is sustainability is the impact of the company on the world. ESG is the impact of the world on the company. So be clear what you want to get into before you make any sort of investment.
That's a very big distinction. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But well said, though.
Yeah. And then along the lines of investing, I saw that you're on your LinkedIn that you're on the advisory committee of Morgan Stanley's Next Level Fund, which invests in female and diverse-led founded startups, which sounds really cool. What kind of businesses are they funding?
Oh, it's usually tech-led. So admittedly, I tend to see ESG in everything. So whenever I see a company, I'm like, they're solving an ESG problem. But really, this was something interesting. I have a capital markets background. Morgan Stanley was one of my customers. And they kind of came to me and somebody else at Microsoft, who's my close friend, and said, hey, we have this fund. It's going to be investing in early stage female and diverse-led and founded startups. It's called the Next Level Fund. It's spun out of this really interesting group at Morgan Stanley called the Multicultural Innovation Lab, which focuses on even earlier stage startups and helping them. And so, yeah, we went to our treasury group and got funding for it. And now I sit on the LP advisory committee. So once a month, I told them on the call, I'm like, this is my favorite call every month. I have 90 minutes to talk about amazing companies. And then what's interesting is there are a lot of technology first companies, as you would expect with startups. I take a look at them and I try to see how I can help them do technology better because we're a technology company. So I'll get them integrated, into our different product groups or different people who might be able to help them succeed. So yeah, it's definitely one of the most favorite things I do.
That's really great. I'm glad you get to do that. And best call of your week. Obviously it didn't happen this week, hopefully. And, because I won't take it personally, I promise. No, I'm kidding.
I'm trying to think. This week has been so crazy. I honestly can't remember Monday.
I know. Yeah, we were talking about that a little earlier, but you also, you said earlier, there's lots of people in the show. They have all these crazy stories about the environment. And I think actually, I want to talk about one of the stories you have with the environment, your experience with it, because everybody does have some experience with the environment, no matter what, right? No matter what your job is. The earth is here and it does let it make its presence known. What is your story with Hurricane Isaias and how does it inform us about the environmental impacts we're seeing all over the world?
Oh my gosh. So I live in a little bit of a rural area in Pennsylvania and I'm up on a hill. I think it's about, 500 feet above sea level maybe, but it kind of slopes down into a valley. And then behind me are like very small Appalachian Mountains, which are not mountains if you've ever seen the Rocky Mountains, but they're there. So this is like my backyard. And I've lived here, my wife and I have lived here, oh my gosh, 16, 17 years now. We're on a hill, never had any sort of issue with any sort of severe weather. Now, because we're on a hill, we do get severe winds. There's a gap in the mountains out that way. And like the wind just whips through here. So we've lost sighting in the past, but like that's always been a thing. But when Hurricane Isaias came through in August of 2020, we ended up for the first time I think at the time it was, that would have been 15 years into our house. We got water in the basement and it was coming in everywhere from the backside of our house. And so what was happening was the wind was so high and the rain was so intense, it was pushing the siding above the patio door. There were two problems. This is one. It was pushing the siding above the patio door, like in, and water was just pouring in right on our first floor. And then the second problem was we have like French drains all over the house. There's two of them. And then the rain gutters, like some of them go straight down into the French drain and then out. Right. And the second problem was it was such a high volume in such a short time, which is something that has started happening more often, that the water just started coming up from the ground into the basement. Again, I'm on a hill. This should so all of this is happening. It's pouring rain. It's maybe like 50-ish degrees. It was really cool. I'm outside in the rain with a ladder on like these paver patio steps that we have. Nobody's holding the ladder. I'm trying to like duct tape plastic on the watery side of the house to try to get it to stop to come in. Then my daughter comes running up from the basement. She's like, we got water in the basement now. And so the kid, we went through every towel we had.
Oh yeah.
My parents ran up some sump pumps. Luckily the damage wasn't that bad, but it happened again, not as bad a year later. It wasn't coming in the same spots, but it started coming in like the window wells of the basement. And I said to my wife, I'm like, we've been here for so long, but we've never had winds like that. And the volume of rain at once, which it's that particular, the volume of area at once is becoming an issue in Pennsylvania, because when that happens, as I'm sure many of your listeners know, it doesn't contribute to the groundwater. It just kind of, it sits in areas all over the place and it's just a mess. It is an absolute mess. So what amazes me is what amazes me most about stories like that is I'm hearing them more often from people who don't work in this space. Like my mother-in-law told me, like they just had flooding up at her house this past spring and it moved like a big railroad tie, like 5 feet up against this tree. And she's 80 something. She couldn't move it. And then like along the edge of her road, the gravel like all washed away and now she has to refill it. And I'm hearing more and more stories like that as I get out into the community. And I think what I'm hoping is it's starting to change people's minds about climate change. Like it's not just a freak weather event anymore. They're like, this is starting to happen more often. Maybe there's something all that climate change I keep hearing about.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's funny how it doesn't seem to care very much what our thoughts and opinions are. It just does what it does, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
You can throw in a DC quote there about people needing dramatic examples to shake them out of their apathy.
Yes. And yeah, we're getting consistent examples on a daily basis, it seems.
It's frightening.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And there's certain parts of the country that the drought we have in the Southwest is a great example of that. And there is no end in sight for any of that. So yeah, it is a wild time. But okay. All right. We did clear out a little bit here because now we're going to talk comics. This is very important because I don't think we've done that on the show yet. So I'm going to nerd out a little bit, but my first big question for you is DC or Marvel, and then the incredibly unfair, who's your favorite?
Oh my gosh. So DC. Okay. So I am a DC guy for comic books.
Woo!
Total Marvel fan for content though, like movies and TV, which is interesting in the house. As a matter of fact, you can't see it over here. I have a whole bunch of Batman stuff on my left.
Yeah. Right.
Oh my gosh. And your second question, who's my favorite?
I know it's an impossible question. I know it is. I mean,
it is. It's probably Batman though. I mean,
yes.
Yeah, it's probably Batman.
If you'd said Superman, the call would have ended. Good that you said Batman. I'm kidding. Okay. So did you see the most recent Batman movie?
I did not. I haven't. Well, mostly because of COVID and we have 3 kids, so we never got out, but okay. I need to pick it up. Yeah.
It's good. It's long. I think that's the consensus. It's good and long. But no, it was emo Batman. And so that's my kind of Batman.
I couldn't finish it. I couldn't do it.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and I love Batman. Love.
Yeah. It is about 35 minutes too long. But okay, so where did the love of comics come from? What was the background?
Oh, I'm a huge Snoopy fan. So I always grew up reading comics. Comics. But then it wasn't, to my wife's detriment, it wasn't until after we got married that I got into comic books. And so what happened was, oh my gosh, I don't know if it was Image or somebody started publishing like Transformers comics. And I'm Gen X, so I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to get Transformer comics. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Right.
So I went out and bought Transformer comics. I'm like, this is actually not bad. I was an English major. I'm like, I love to read.
Yeah.
Comics, I can pick it up. I can read it for 5 minutes and, move on. And then quickly I found DC's Vertigo line at the time was publishing, I think, Why the Last Man, and then Fables. And then I was just like, this is a whole thing now. And that was probably almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that though. I love it. Your wife's detriment.
Very much so.
Oh, that's so fun. Is she a Marvel fan? Is that what's happening?
No. That is me and the kids. Yeah. Yes. We're very much opposite.
Oh, that's so great. And we also had Dawn Wright on the show from Esri, and she has a similar love of Legos that you do. Yeah. And she does the preset builds, which is what I did as well. And I don't know. So are you a preset guy or are you a build your own guy?
I have to do presets. So let me tell you the story. The Lego movie, right? I'm sitting there in the theater with my family and I'm on one end. We have 3 kids. They were in the middle. My wife's on the other end. And we're watching, like I have models. Your listeners can't see it, but I have models all over this room. And we're sitting there watching the Lego movie, and I don't want to spoil it. So stop listening, I suppose. But if you haven't seen the Lego movie, go see it. But so I'm sitting there and we're watching it. And when they reveal who President Business is, I just see my wife lean forward in the seat and kind of look down the aisle at me. So that is the type of builder that I am.
Oh. And, oh my gosh, that's incredible for lots of reasons, especially considering the message of the movie.
Right. I've been open. The kids have their own Legos. Dad has his Legos. I don't use glue though, admittedly, but I do enjoy. You know what? To be honest, under COVID, when I have to sit and focus on calls, I will pull out a Lego and start building it because it helps. Otherwise, I'm clicking everywhere.
Yeah.
It really helps me kind of focus.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, like I said, the joy of Legos. It's one of those things that I never thought in a million years. You do it as a kid, and then two things happen. Either you start going to IKEA, and that's your new Legos, or you just keep Legos, right? Like that's kind of just the joy of it. So
yeah,
we only have a couple of questions left, and so you and your wife do have something in common, gardening in particular. So what's in your garden?
So we actually don't have that in common. So I am
Laura. You killing me.
So I am.
No, listen. I saw this on your social media. There's a garden, and it has to. I don't know. You look like you were having fun doing it.
I do. I am the construction person for the garden. So I am the one who ran the water line down. I built the beds. I helped rototill. Oh my gosh, which I know releases carbon and is bad, but we didn't have a choice. And we also get I shovel, I do all the prep, and then it's her one hobby. So I'm into Legos, and I have 10 other hobbies like comics. Gardening is really her one hobby. And I think we have 8 4x8 raised beds plus 2 2x4 raised beds. Oh my gosh, we have everything down there. So we're in Pennsylvania, but somehow we grow watermelons here, which I didn't realize we could grow. We have potatoes down there, getting tons of lettuce. Tomatoes, they're not ready yet, but they're coming out. Just tons of different vegetables. She got some zucchini out this week, and it's always great. She'll go down in the morning and pick it, and then we'll have it for dinner with the kids.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it is really cool.
Yeah, so a practical hobby, unlike your Legos.
Right.
Legos for dinner.
Yeah, you can't do that. No.
Not advised. No, we are running out of time, and I hate to say it because we've had a lot of fun with you today. But is there anything else you'd like to talk about before we let you go?
The only thing I think out of everything I've said, if you can figure out a way to take your skills, no matter what they are, and apply it to the challenges that businesses are facing, maybe a little bit outside your comfort zone, I think you'll find a lot of success. I certainly had that applying my English degree to my technology, and then applying technology to sustainability. I think a lot of people kind of miss that. It's okay. And I know I've heard somebody talk about this on your podcast before. It's okay to pivot careers. Don't be afraid to, especially if it's in the service of sustainability.
Yeah, that's a great message. And I'm glad you get to share it again. So before we let you go, tell people where they can find you.
Sure. So I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter. I believe the only Matthew Sekol out there. So should be able to search me up. Yep.
Thank you, Matthew. Appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, that's our show. Thank you, Matthew, for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today. Please be sure to check us out each and every Friday. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Bye.